sure thing, mate. So I suppose again, like not really recalling the last time we met up on the podcast, but I know it's been a little bit between drinks, but obviously Bendigo Gub Hub was a big one for us and a big one for Victoria. Coming off that one, a lot of learnings coming out of that, and then really we've been sort of flat stick over the last couple of years. We've gone, we're local and interstate as well. So Cows Community Hub, Westfield Knox, Melbourne Racing Club, the Decuba headquarters in Cremorne, St Kilda Eco Centre, NashCap offices and Charter Hall, with Vaughan Constructions, a big VSBA bundle that ran for about 6 months, Fitzroy Sports Centre, and we're currently working on Flinders Uni in the Factory of the Future in South Oz, and a large educational project at St Francis Xavier College in Berwick, which is about 2,500 CLT panels coming out of KLH. So,
Jeez.
I mean, it's flat stick at the moment. It's good to see.
Yeah, that's so good, man. And how at that very high level, how have things been evolving? That's a lot of projects. There's a lot of meetings, and there's probably patterns, and maybe same things pop up, but like whack-a-mole, but some things sort of like get fixed. How are things evolving at that level?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably only the last sort of 12 months we've seen a pretty significant shift in what we're doing and how we're being and how early we're being brought on. I mean, go back sort of, a year and a half, 2 years ago, it was always really late in the piece. We'd come onto a job, or later in the piece when most things had been resolved. So we're seeing a massive shift now where we're getting the call up at really early design development stage, like concept stage for for in-store input. And mate, it's been so successful. I mean, we've been able to just leave your ego at the door, all the consultants, and just say, right, what works, what doesn't work. A design comes through, we can somewhat offer some opinions around rationalization, and it goes back through the system and then comes out, and and it's really, as it progresses, it's really about bringing all the other disciplines into the room as well, and giving them the opportunity to have their say, and educate them about the whole timber system. And I think, like, probably spoke about this at the timber conference. It was, a shining example of that was at the Tonsley project we're currently on in South Australia, and it's just we were on from about 25% DD, and we've been part of the journey the whole way through, and it's been an absolute success story. Like, one of the best jobs I've been involved with. And even from the reports back from the guys on the ground, this has just been an absolute dream. So it really goes to show, like, that emphasis around the early contractor involvement that everyone preaches. When it's done right, it's a really successful outcome for the project as a whole. So I'm seeing that shift now, and I think, like, there's a little bit of freedom in the industry now, where there's a lot of cohesiveness and a lot of cooperation. I mean, you go back again, like those 6-7 years ago, when a lot of the IP was wrapped up in these bigger sort of tier one guys, and it was all sort of hush hush. And I think now that everyone's sort of collaborating a bit more, and there's a bit of cross pollination across suppliers on big jobs, it's so much better for everyone involved now, because it's not so secretive. And there's, of course, there's always going to be a slight amount of IP wrapped up in things, but I think it's just a really collaborative environment at the moment.
Yeah.
So that's the way I'm seeing the whole timber construction shift at the moment. It's sort of everyone's sort of willing to put in that upfront work for a better outcome.
Yeah, and that IP stuff. Yeah, you're right. Like, there wasn't long ago that people weren't even allowed to speak at conferences in some tier one firms, and like they'd have to get approval and get declined, and then everything's hidden. But
Yeah,
you
it's
know, so it's,
bananas. I mean, at the end of the day, like we were a bit cagey at the start, I suppose, around some of our IP. But I mean, if people are doing it correctly, then it's going to be a better outcome for industry. So the more collaborative you can be, even with your competitors, the better.
yeah, yeah. If there's any, like, the worst thing that can happen is some projects getting burnt from it,
Yep.
just, and then you got bad stories, you got a team of consultants, and then you got a team of people who are going to be Dr. Knows next time it comes up because it didn't
Oh,
didn't go well.
100%. Yeah.
And like you said, I'm keen to learn more about that project you mentioned. I think you said it was Adelaide, but was
Yeah.
Adelaide? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So yeah, Factory of the Future in Adelaide. Yeah.
and that's the
Yeah.
one that was the killer, was it? As in, like,
I was,
going went amazing. Yeah, yeah.
that was yeah, it was absolute. That's an absolute dream boat. Yeah. Yeah.
So that was
It's
like, so
gone
you're all
real
coming
well.
on at 25%, and then tell us
Yeah.
about that. Like, so what are some of the things that how those engagements and
I mean,
those moments that you got to,
yeah. So
yeah,
we don't get. I mean, we don't get too wrapped up in the technical aspect of it, like the grid setouts and the architectural and structural grids and things like that. I mean, that's discussions for manufacturers and architects and structural engineers about what system works best to suit the project as a whole and the manufacturer's capabilities. But certainly when we get down to connections and things like that, and we get into the nitty gritty of beam to column connections, column to concrete, beam to concrete, steel to timber, all those different proprietary connections as well, and what works and what doesn't. Rationalized spacings and typologies of screws into CLT, all those sort of things. I mean, it's easy to get caught up in a bit of paper sometimes and just like pluck a few things out of a catalog. That works
yeah,
brilliantly there, but I suppose having a holistic view or a buildability of a point of view, it comes with a whole lot of rationalization around that and thinking like a fella would on the ground who's looking at the plans at the end of the day for the first time. It's sort of like it changes things a little bit. So just having that I suppose historical knowledge about all the different connections and how they work and how efficient they are. I mean, it's
yeah,
that's the number one goal at the end of the day, is to make these projects efficient and go up really quickly,
yeah,
so we can get a building envelope on them. So, and it's just yeah. I mean, we found at Tonsley the biggest, I suppose, the thing that we didn't expect the most was the manufacturing. We would catch up to manufacturing. So we're actually going that quick on site, quicker than our anticipated program, which meant we were sort of, nipping at the heels of manufacturing. So, I mean, that's a real good problem to have.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's so good, man. And yeah, so I mean, connections, like, without you in the room or an installer in the room, it's, you got material price, you got how easy is it to design, like for an engineer, it's just look up a catalog and,
correct. Yeah, that's
as part,
right.
yeah, but without yourself there, then do you have any bad stories? Like, you don't have to name the project, but like you get the drawings, it's too late, and then you got this same connection detail, which is a shocker, and you got 3 months of install it. You know what I mean? Is there anything like that?
I mean,
That actually,
probably what you typically see is all these K-brace arrangements and some of the
gotcha.
dowling arrangements that that go into these things, and that I suppose you could probably simplify a lot. It requires a lot of CNC time, a lot of time on
Mm,
site. It's just, I mean, we're kind of caught up with there's a lot of European design still floating around, I think, in the
mm,
Australian market. So, using, smooth dowels in little bolts and things like that. And, the sheer amount or the sheer number of dowels required in some connections, and probably not having I suppose, the insight into how difficult they are to install in real life.
yeah,
One or two connections is fine, but when you're talking about thousands of connections over a huge site, it can be very problematic, even
yeah,
from a health and safety perspective as well. So
yeah,
you're asking someone to execute thousands of dowels, utilizing even tooling or whatever. There's got to be a rotational system involved so that just RSI sort of stuff. And yeah, so it's, there's a few different factors that sort of go into our perspective of how connections work, from not just a buildability, but from a safety perspective as well.
Yeah. And I mean, like, if we're going for typical details, which everyone, should be going, it's also the advantage there. Like, you could just go hard on one connection detail and scale that out, right? Like, rather than just have everything chopping and changing everywhere, which
Yep.
yeah, never seems to work out right. Yeah.
Yep. And I think, like, where we're seeing a huge benefit at the moment is just bearing connections. Bearing connections with like an incline pin connection at the top of a beam column interface.
Yeah.
And it's insane. I think
You just drop it and
we
then
were
you
sort of down
move
about
on.
11 minutes a beam or something on top of a column. So it's an insane speed that we can assemble.
What is the swing on installation speeds on some of the projects you've been a part of? And it's probably hard to like do a comparison with concrete, because like it's probably a question I might have asked you previously,
Yeah.
but something I'm always interested in is because, like, if we're driving down the costs and trying to claw back material price, it does come down to stuff like that where your speed is everything.
Yep.
What is the swing on speeds you get from like a really good design, which you might be involved at the start, versus something that doesn't work really well?
100%. Like, we could be anywhere from an 11-minute per element up to half an hour, 40 minutes per element. So there's a huge swing there, massive swing.
Yeah.
So you're talking, we're sort of
just from one, it could be the same, just the connection change is like
exactly
3x.
Right. Correct.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Yep. So, and I mean, and even when you're talking about international supply versus an Australian supply, there's a whole swing there as well at a quantity of members required to make up one wall run. For instance, in CLT, you might have two elements that might make 12 meters of wall in Australia, but if it's coming containerized overseas, that wall might be made up of 10 elements to get the 12 meters. So that all needs to be considered as well when you're talking about efficiency in the build, because there's a huge discrepancy there.
Yeah, and I guess like is that question, do you want suppliers in the room? Well, I guess they've got a lot of value to add early, but there's always that competitive tension. But in your role, you'd be independent of suppliers, so you could probably provide that advice, and because every local supplier is going to go hard on the shipping containers, and then so yeah.
And it's all, I suppose, a spreadsheet analysis at the end of the day. It might be cheaper fiber coming out of Europe, but the labour required to put the additional panels in may be cost neutral, may not be cost neutral. So it's all a bit of a balancing act, really.
Yeah. One of the things that I guess people maybe just starting out, and maybe it is a risk that we're all going to be keep on top of, is, well, risk in general. So rather than just like shoehorn you down the whole moisture path, like how what are the major risks to be aware of, and what are the sort of things we can do to mitigate these risks and problems that might happen?
Yeah, I mean, moisture is inherently a big problem. It's not only a problem in timber building; it's a problem in conventional builds as well. I mean, the reality is the performance of the building is reliant on the performance of the envelope and how well that's been executed at the end of the day. And I think it's a combination of all parties having a responsibility, from design all the way through to the build, all the way through to the passive sort of preventative measures that are implemented down the path in the life of the building. So I just don't think there's a clear-cut answer to moisture mitigation. I mean, everyone knows that it's get the building envelope on as quick as possible. That's a golden rule of any building, really. But I think we're seeing a lot of products coming on the market now where we can monitor the moisture level in a building post envelope being enclosed.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean, I think there's a responsibility that we sort of we look after our timber buildings, for the life of the building. So that, and maybe it's a little bit smarter design as well. And maybe it's not just a timber, a timber panel on a balcony. Maybe it's a composite design, or maybe it's something else to consider. So I think from an installation perspective as well, it's important to really have those conversations, those strategies up front, before you even step foot on site. So, and making provision even within the design development or the manufacturing development of certain provisions within the building that we can use as water mitigation. So we talk pretty heavily at the start of buildings about how we're going to dissipate the water in a rain event, and how we're going to, keep the timber dry. So somewhat. So I think it's an important discussion to have, but it's important to have those discussions early. I mean, we've always sort of come undone when it's a last minute sort of how we're going to mitigate these issues, and then it becomes just a series of events of a trial and failure until you try and get something right, and you try and do that in conjunction with building the structure as well. So I think that those early conversations and the early moisture strategies, especially during assembly, is really important. But then continuing that strategy down through the remainder of the build, and then into its usable life.
Yeah, that's great. It's probably like one of those every builder has to learn from experience or something. I had that first one because when I was at Xland, it was just like everyone on their first time moisture would just be a bit of an issue. But then you go to other sites and it's well managed, like you say.
I think like even manufacturers have a responsibility. It's their product that they're promoting and bringing to a market. So there needs to be some buy-in and input, quite heavily from the manufacturing side of things to how we're keeping the timber safe, and educating, consumers on, how that's done.
Yeah. There's shooting from the hip a bit here, but there's a lot of new projects going around. I saw another high-rise building going up in Milwaukee in USA. You've obviously got Atlassian Tower, you got C6 in Perth. What do you get excited by high-rise buildings and stuff like that? Do you think there's a big future in it? And do you see, I guess, the benefits of scale in the industry like that?
I think I do. Particularly with Atlassian, I think that the strategy for the timber portion of the build is quite probably inefficient somewhat. I think that, when we talk about high rise, I think that there's a lot more to the story than just, assembling the timber. It's quite high rises are quite challenging projects at the best of times. So I think that we're going to see a lot of learnings come out of the space when we're talking about high rise timber construction. And some of those lessons may not come out for 5 to 10 years, but certainly it's exciting. But I think that we've got a little way to go first before we're taking the leap into these massive timber buildings. I think master the craft before we shoot for the stars. So and not saying that we're not there. I think that we are, and certain people are, but I think that I'm a little bit trepidatious about the future there. But baby steps, I think.
Yeah, well said. And I guess it's good to have innovators in the sense of having arrows to get those learnings. But then there's levels of what the step forward is. So it's
100%.
Yeah. So what do you looking forward into the future, what do you see as the future of our industry? Where do you see things heading over the coming 5, 10, 15 years?
I think we've pretty much just touched on. I think we're just going to keep pushing the boundaries, really. And I think Australia as a nation are probably pretty good at that anyway. Sort of, taking what we need from overseas and making it our own and pushing the boundaries here. I think we're going to see a lot more in the glulam space. I think that that's probably something that we really haven't unlocked in Australia yet. The sort of the bespoke glue lam and the ability of what glue lam can create. I think that's going to be the next sort of real trend in Australia, and we're sort of seeing some structures sort of come across our desk now that are really sort of, you know, pushing the limits of glue lam and design and architectural design. So pretty exciting there, and I think we're going to see a massive shift in an industrial movement into timber as well. So we've got a couple of we've been involved in a couple of projects now with some large multinational sort of factory building property groups, and I think that's probably the next big shift for that industry is to move into a more sustainable way of building.
Yeah, it's funny, like the Goodman's project in Moorabbin, the warehouse there. You know, I've been in this space for a while now. My family and mates, they from back at high school, they don't really know what I'm doing. But then, because that's in our area, even CLT Toolbox, they're like, "Oh, there's this software thing." They're like, "What the hell?" Like everyone knows it from that building going up. It's like, everyone's blowing me up all the time by how good it looks and all
It's
that. And everyone's
insane, isn't
excited.
it? I sort of don't tell people when I go out what I do anymore, because it's almost like every person you meet, you've got to start at ground zero again and explain to them what CLT is or engineered timber is, and they sort of look at you with a vague look, and so like, oh, you just build frames commercially.
Yeah, they're just thinking about something else with their eyes glazed over a lot of the time, and that's
just sort of say, yeah, I'm in construction.
That's great, mate. If people want to find out more about yourself, where should they go?
Mate, you can go to our website, www.standstruct.com.au. We're also on the socials as well, so or reach out directly to me, mate. So my number's plastered all over the website. So always happy to have a chat or catch up for a beer with someone.
Yeah, absolutely. Timber Construct, you're in good form there. So I second that.